Okay, so the program we're going to be using is called Adobe Premiere. So if you're on the desktop, you can just go Applications and open it up that way. You can also use the keyboard shortcut Command-Shift-A if you're nerdy like that. But it is in the top of the list in the A section. And it's a purple folder labeled Adobe Premiere Pro. Double click that and then double click the icon. You don't see that one? So initially, the first time you boot this up, it's going to take a minute to show up. It just says it's a purple square with P and R written in it. And it looks like, yeah, Jack's got it going. Okay, so while we're waiting for that to load, are there any questions about the assignment so far? If you haven't submitted part 1, please go ahead and do that because that was due Thursday. I see a lot of people already started submitting part 2, so it's good also. We'll skip this nice little intro at what I think is Angkor Wat, but I could be wrong. Anyway. So we want to start a new project. And we'll title our project. In this case, I interviewed Nicholas, so we'll call this Nicholas Interview. You'll just title it whatever your group is. So if you're doing RHA, you'll do RHA Interview. If you're doing Anime Club, you'll do Anime Club Interview. Trying to remember if you're interviewing Daquan, or no, if Daquan is interviewing you about ZTA, that's what he submitted as his. So, yeah. So if you're doing that, that's fine. A couple things you need to pay attention to in this screen right here are there is an option that says scratch disks. Those will all be set to same as project. That's just a file management thing to make sure all your stuff is in one place. And then you'll want to go over here to the Browse button and save it on the external hard drive. So I already set up a folder on last week that was called, it was called Galen, maybe? No. Let's see, this is it. Yeah. So I set up a folder on here called Galen 2. So I'm just going to save the project to that Galen 2 folder. Yours could be Lauren 1 or Tristan project, whatever you want to call it. But just make sure that you save it in the folder on the external hard drive. Because if you save it on the computer itself, these might get full and ITES might come in and just delete them. So we don't want that. You want to be able to have your project and you don't want to have to re-record it or redo anything. So click OK. And then the editing window comes up. So important windows to remember on here. This is the source window, also called the canvas window in some video applications. This is the program window or the output window, this top right. Down here you have your timeline where your sequences are held at. Over here you have the project window, and these are all labeled. So if you're following along at home or on the computer right now, they're all labeled as to how they work. Over here we have audio meters. That's not labeled, but it can't be anything but audio meters. And then we have the toolbar in the middle here. So if you used Adobe applications in the past, you're pretty used to this layout of different windows and then a tool window. So the first thing we want to do after we've got our project in here is we want to import the media. So there's one of two ways we can do that. We can either go to Import Media to start, just click here, or we can go File, Import, or we can do the keyboard shortcut Command-I. I'm just going to click the Import Media to start, double click down here, and it pulls up the folder that my file is saved in. I'll just import this raw folder with all these clips that we shot last week. And see, by labeling them outside, I don't have to label them in here. There's two that I didn't label, so let's see what this is. This is kind of a, this is a dynamic or a dolly in shot. So let's label it dolly in. If you click on the file twice slowly, it'll let you change the file name. So there's also a scrub bar in this view that lets you shoot. So this will be wide shot class. Okay. So now I've got all my footage labeled. I've got the time lapse. I've got the dolly in. I've got my interview with Nick. I've got footage of Nick working at the computer on a wide shot, WS Nick. I've got a close-up of Nick's hands, CU. I've got a wide shot of the class. And I've got a medium close-up of Nick's hands down here. If you don't, for some reason, like this view, which I don't, just because I don't really need to see thumbnails, as long as I can see file names, there's an option down here in the bottom left that lets you change in between the icon view or the thumbnail view and the list view. So I'm going to swap over to that real quick, but to make it easier on y'all, let's go back to the icon list. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to edit Nick's interview. We need about 1:30 to, I think it was 1:45 to 2:30 that we need for the final interview. His interview is 5 minutes, so not everything's going to be able to stay in here. But the way that we can edit his interview is we double click it. It loads it up into the source window up here, and then we can use the scrubber bar to scroll through till we find the stuff that we want to use. So, start off at the beginning. So we don't need to have that in there. We just need to have him spell it because when we do the title later on, we want to be able to have that. So if we're moving too slow, just by scrolling through, there's a way that you can fast forward and rewind through the timeline of the source window up here, and that's called JKL editing. And so if you press the J key on the keyboard, it goes back in fast motion. If you press K, it stops. And if you press L, it goes forward quickly. So we'll just scroll through till we find the part that we want to start with. Past me talking and rambling. Don't need any of that. So we'll stop it right there. We want to start on this clip. We can set an endpoint on this clip in one of two ways. Down here, there is a button that's labeled Mark In. It looks like a bracket pointing to the left. That'll mark an endpoint. You'll also know that it has in parentheses the I key. And to mark an out point, if you click the bracket on the right, it'll mark an out point. It's also labeled O. So I set an endpoint using the I key. I'll play the clip. So I'll end right there on the process will continue. I'll click the O key or click the out marker, whichever one works better. And now I've got an edited clip. But I want to drag it down here into my timeline so when I start assembling, I'll know where my clips are. So if I just if I click up here and drag down to the timeline, it creates a brand new sequence called interview. And it is just that clip that I selected before. It starts with you're not chosen, or you don't choose, you're chosen. Okay, and then it ends on the part at the end I was talking about. And the process will continue. Okay, so that's one edited clip. And that right there lasted 18 seconds, so I need some more. See if we can find some more stuff about him talking about fraternity.
So much more discipline. Show me I can get the hits. It's probably really see through. There's no. It's giving me so much more. It's giving me so much more discipline.
So we want to start on it's giving me so much more discipline. So he starts right about there with its. You can also use the left and right arrows to go back and forth a frame at a time till you get the part that you want to start on. So right there you hear him say it. So you know it's going to be, it's giving me endpoint.
Giving me so much more discipline. Showing I can get the hit. It's giving me so much more discipline. Showing I can get the hit. It's probably really see through. There's nothing I can go through that I can't make it through if I cross the sands and make it over. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, and after I made it, I have full confidence going through any adversity.
Okay, so that's another clip we can use. Let's try it down here in the timeline also. In fact, that one probably fits better before this clip instead of after it. So drag this down, drag this around it, and put that at the front. Okay, so now we've got a little bit of this. So we got 2 complete clips. We got 23 seconds. I'm going to grab one more clip for the demonstration, and then we'll get into how to cover it with B-roll. So we had a really good soundbite here at the end. So we'll pull that in.
I'll start with the divine nine. Where we stand on our 4 cardinal principles are negative, which also is a proper principle. Where we stand on our
Start with where we stand on. Right there.
Where we stand on our 4 cardinal principles are negative, scholarship, perseverance, and uplift. I think we're not trying to be all macho, but we're like the manliness of all of the works out here, and we're all about hard work. I see a lot of people, yeah, we party, but we also got the second highest GPA in here at the university. Nationally, we're known for that. I think we have one of the strongest alumni networks. We provide some of the greatest resources to all members who make it through.
Okay, to all members that make it through. We'll stop there. Try this down in our timeline. Okay, and so now we've got a fairly coherent interview with the 3 clips. And right now that's at 1 minute. So if I was doing this for realsies, I'd only need 45 more seconds to complete my project. So the first thing I noticed in laying down this interview is that the audio is kind of soft. He's coming in, when we play it on the audio meters, see it's coming in around -18, so we want to raise that. There's 2 ways to do that. The way that I like to do it is if you grab the little audio track right here, drag it down a little bit, it'll reveal a line right here that you can raise and lower the volume with. It probably needs to go up about 6 dB to hit. We're trying to get it to peak around this -6 area. So let's see what we got.
It's probably really see through. There's nothing I can go through that I can't make it through if I cross the sands in the way.
So it looks like adding 6 dB is going to make it work. So we can apply that to the other clips, just raise it 6 dB. The other thing you can do if you don't like raising the line, if you just right click and go to audio gain, and you'll adjust the gain by 6 dB. Click OK, and it goes ahead and raises that up.
I'm going to be all macho, but we're like the manliness of all the works out here, and we're all about hard work. I see a lot of.
Okay, so we've got the audio brought up to where we want it. We've got these clips looking good, but you'll notice if we show this, he kind of jumps there a little bit. That's actually a jump cut between these 2 things right there. And it looks awkward and feels even worse to watch. So I'll stop that at some point. So the way that we can cover those gaps is instead of doing that, we'll cover it with B-roll. So we can take some footage of Nicholas with his hands typing at a keyboard, or actually here's him on the Omega Sci-Fi site, or whatever kind of B-roll you get. You can just drag it in here and then shrink it down if you want that way. That's kind of the lazy way to do it, and it doesn't ensure that you get the shot that you want. The better way to do it is just like you did the interview clip. If you double click it, his interview clip goes away because we're not editing that one anymore, and we're left with this. So we'll find where we want to start. It's a static shot. In this case, the computer is the subject. By the way, I should have mentioned this earlier, but okay, so we obviously don't want me talking on there, so we'll set our end point back here. We'll set our out point, and instead of just dragging the clip down, which gives us over here on the right, I don't really have a second pointer to point at, but it gives us the video and audio tracks. Instead of doing that, we want to drag down just the video. So there is an icon right here that looks like a film strip, an old film strip, and if you hover over it, it says drag video only. If you hover over the waveform, it says drag audio only. So in this case, we want to drag just the video only, so we'll grab that, drag it down, and it just drags his footage over. So now when we play it back, okay, so choose and you get chosen basically. Okay, so that's probably where we want to come back to him. So if you look at the waveforms down here at the bottom, can't zoom in on these a whole lot, but actually I can. So if you look at the waveforms down here, a good point to insert your B-roll is where there's a valley in this waveform. So he stops talking momentarily right here, so that's when we want to start it. And then right here, if we bring the playhead over here, there's a small valley. You zoom in, it'll be better. By the way, you can grab the bar at the bottom to zoom it in and out. You see that little valley right there? That's where we want to end the clip. So just drag this over to the side. And if you hit the tilde key on the top left corner right below escape, that's what lets you zoom in on these windows. So if we want to see Nick full size, we'll do that. If we want to see interview full size, we'll do that. Yeah. So we've got this clip to cover up our audio issue. So let me get that shrunk down a little more. Zoom back out. So now when we play it back, okay, so there wasn't really an issue with it this time, but sometimes if you want to, between audio clips, there is an effect. Well, actually, we'll go over effects here, or transitions here in a second. But does anybody, up until this point, does anybody have any questions about this at all? It's kind of like iMovie, it's just a little more complicated and a little more in-depth. Cool. Okay, and keep in mind that you're actually going to be doing this, so if you do have questions, feel free to ask. So we have this clip, and it goes from Nick to Nick at a computer. That's kind of confusing. So we can ease this transition, if you will, between these two clips by putting in a transition. So if you go to the Effects tab under Video Transitions, there's all kinds of crazy ones you can use. You could use Cube Spin or Flip Over, but for the purposes of this class, you won't. So like if I do the Cube Spin, we don't want that. It's also got the Flip Over, which we don't want that. So we'll take those off. For the purposes of this class, you can feel free, if you're editing your own personal projects, go ahead and use whatever transition you want, but the one that we'll use for this class only is the cross dissolve. And it's the default transition. So if you hover over the front of the clip and click it and hit Command D, it'll put the default transition in there. But otherwise, you can just grab that default transition, bring it to the end, and now when Nick is talking, it cross dissolves into Nick. So let me go back.
choose and hope you get chosen, basically. You can go to the interest meeting.
So there's that. But at this point, pretty much all you're doing is after you've got that, you're wanting to cover up the rest of the gaps. So for this last one, we'll take the time lapse just because that was fun. Start there. And stop. That looks like a good amount. We'll bring it over here. Actually, we might want to extend it just a little bit more. You'll notice that when I grabbed it, I just grabbed it up here and brought it down, but the audio didn't come down. That's because this clip doesn't have audio. So I could have done, and you'll notice that the drag audio only is grayed out because it doesn't have audio. So I could have done it either way. I could have dragged the audio down this, or dragged the video down that way, or just dragged it down from the clip. But go ahead and put that default transition on the end with Command D, and on the end with Command D. And now we've got, let's see. Actually, let's lengthen this a little bit. So remember what I said about the valleys? So here's a valley right here, and here's a valley right here, the end of that clip. So play it.
If you do that correctly, then you'll be selected further and the process will continue. Where we stand on our 4 cardinal principles are management, scholarship, perseverance, and uplift. I think we're the man. Not trying to be on.
Cool. So does anybody have any questions so far about transitions or B-rolls? How you can lay them over?
Do we have to use all 16 shots?
No, you don't. You just choose the ones that you need. You have to shoot 16, but you just choose the ones that you feel fit that best. So if they're talking about something like in his case with a chili cook-off, if they're talking about, well, we had 11 different competitors, if you have a wide shot that shows all the competitors, use that to cover up your B-roll kind of thing. Whatever fits best. Yeah. No, you don't have to have all the questions. All you have to have is 1:45 to 2:30. So like with this is only 3 questions right here. We'd probably only end up using 5, but we shot 10 because it's always better to have more than to not have enough. Cool. Okay, so the only other thing that you'll need to accomplish in editing for part 3, let me find a picture where Nicholas looks good. So, place we can stop on. Okay, so that looks good right there. So the last thing you'll need to do, and let me go ahead and pull that assignment up. Hold, please. So in part 3 of the assignment, which a lot of you already turned in part 2, thank you for doing that. I think I'm actually caught up on grading to where, like, if you turned it in today, you've already gotten feedback today. So, okay, multimedia production. Video assignment 1, part 3. Okay, so for this part, you need to have all your footage imported and labeled in the project window, utilizing the shot info that you established in your shot list. B-roll clips must match those listed on your shot sheet. So if you look at my Premiere window, I've got my clips down here, and they are all listed by what kind of sheet or what kind of shot they are and what they are exactly. So that's part 1 of that. Part 2, go back over here. Create your initial sequence. That was done whenever we dragged a clip down into here. So we already have a sequence called interview. Over here, it shows up as a sequence. Part 3 is create a lower third template. We're going to do that here in a second. And part 4 is save your project file on the external hard drive. You can do that very simply by just going File, Save. And whenever you start the project, you've already got a file name saved up here at the top. So the only part that we're missing from part 3 at this point, if I was turning in this project, is to make a lower third graphic. So to make a graphic, we come over here to the Graphics tab. And you'll see that we have Nick over here. So we will take there's a couple different ways to do this. There's a basic lower third, and if you grab that, you just drag it over to here. Sorry, drag it into your timeline, and you can double click on this. Well, sorry, double click on where it says your name here, and we'll put his name in. So his name is, and right as I say this, it doesn't want to work for me. Oh, I need to have the text tool selected. So we'll double click here. Try that again. Okay, so I'll just go in here and delete the your name here part. We'll put in his name, Nicholas Smith, and we'll put in his title, which is Omega Sci-Fi Fraternity Incorporated member. So, Omega Sci-Fi Fraternity Incorporated. I'll just put INC member. Okay. And we have a lower third ready for Mr. Smith. So, if you want at this point, you can click on the text and put a drop shadow on it to distinguish it from the background. It helps bring it out just a little bit. So highlight that text, put a drop shadow on it. Now it kind of sticks out from his jacket. If you also wanted to, you could put in a rectangle behind it, which I'm not totally sure how that's done in this new version of graphics. This graphics just came out last week, so it's an interesting tab to work with. Anyway, so we've got what we need here. So going back to the editing tab up here at the top, out of graphics and editing. So at this point, you've got a graphic that'll show up over here in your timeline, or it shows up right here. So for part 3, now that I have everything done, I've got the clips imported and labeled. I've got my initial sequence. I've got my lower third template, and I've got my project saved to my external hard drive. All you have to do now is take a screenshot of this. You can either take a picture with your phone if you want, or if you hit Command-Shift-3, it creates a screenshot of that and places it on the desktop. So right here, and there's a shot. And so when I grade this, I'll be like, okay, they have their footage labeled over here. That's cool. They have their lower third template made. That's cool. They had their initial sequence made because I can see it here and I can see it over here. And they have it saved to the hard drive because I can see the file name at the top shows video, their name, and where it's saved. And then I'll give you 100% on that, and then we'll move on to the next part. So, are there any questions about this part of it? That, I believe, is due next Thursday. Yeah. So what you're going to be doing between now and then is going out and shooting with the iPad kits and getting your stuff together. I won't be here next week, so you'll turn this in while I'm not here.
You won't be here at all next week?
I will not.
Are you here this Thursday?
I am. Yeah. And on Thursday, this Thursday, we're going to go over how to export, which is part 4. But I will be here Thursday, and we'll go over that as well. So, are there any questions about that? Anything seem kind of vague? Yes, Jay. No, since it's only a minute 45 piece, you're only going to show it the first time they're shown. So this is a little far forward in the interview. I could have brought it back to right here when he first started talking.
It's giving me so much more discipline.
The other cool thing is with these lower thirds, they also can have transitions applied to them. So if you don't want it to pop in just out of nowhere like that, you can put the default transition on it, and then it fades in.
So much more discipline. Show me I can.
You can also do other stuff. I think there's a slide effect. If you want to put a funky transition on the lower third, that's fine. Just don't put it on the B-roll. So like this push slide is pretty cool.
It's giving me so much more discipline. Show me I can get the ring. It's taught me really
And if you put it on one end, make sure you put it on the other.
more discipline. Show me I can
And
get
it'll
the ring.
slide off when it gets done.
There's no problem. There's nothing I can go through.
So if you don't put the transition, it'll just disappear.
It'll pop on and pop off. Yeah. Which is kind of startling in some cases. So. But did that answer the question, Jade? Sweet. Any more questions? Cool. So I'll go ahead and save this project. And on Thursday, we're going to go over how to export this because for your turn-in, you have to submit it to YouTube. And one of the questions on the test, which I'll be uploading a study guide for, the test won't happen until at least the first week in November, or the first full week of November. One of the questions is, how do I export my project to an MOV? We'll cover that on Thursday. So, are there any questions about anything to do with the assignment? Just to follow up real quick, part 1 was due last Thursday. Part 2 is due today by 5. So that's just your 10 interview questions and your shot sheet for B-roll. Just submit those on Blackboard. And then next Thursday will be when the Blackboard, when you submit your screenshot to me on Blackboard, you'll just attach it on Blackboard of your project. And then the following Thursday will be when the final project is due. But I will be back between then, so you'll have a day in class with me before you submit your final project on that part 1 or assignment 1. So if there are no more questions, y'all are free to go. Thanks for coming out and free to work on your projects if you want to hang out and do that.